This morning on the big story, we'll look at that report, a report that has raised quite a bit of dust. A report by the Human Rights Watch tethered to the happenings in Kasese not too long ago. November 25th to 26th, we saw that place on fire, literally. People died. Police told us a certain number of people that died, and Human Rights Watch thinks there is a lot more than meets the eye. The numbers were underreported, and everything that happened thereon. So this morning we speak to the police spokesperson. We'll also speak to Maria Burnett from Human Rights Watch to give us their side of the story. All right, Andrew Felix Kaweesi. He's a spokesperson of the Uganda Police Force. Good morning, Afande.
Good morning.
How is police?
Police doing well. We are in charge.
You're in charge?
Yeah.
All right. I don't know if Maria Burnett would say the same, especially to do with the Kasese killings. Maria Burnett from Human Rights Watch is joining us live from the U.S. Good morning, Maria.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Let me begin with you, Maria. This report has raised quite a bit of dust. The spokesperson of government of Uganda, of course, was rebutting together with the police and the army, and they're saying, look, the reports that you author, it's because of people that are funding you, you're trying to please them, and so on and so forth. How did you do your research? Let's begin there to get to the numbers that you did and everything that you found out.
Yeah, I want to be clear. Human Rights Watch is an international non-governmental organization. We don't take any government money. So our donors are private donors who care about human rights issues, but they're private citizens from around the world. We carried out this research the way we carry out all research in about 90 countries around the world. I went to Kasese, I went to Bunibujo. I've been in both places over many years. We reported in the aftermath of the July 2014 violence, and we also wrote a 12-page letter to General Kayihura in July of last year outlining our concerns for the post-electoral violence in great detail, including flagging the killings of some security forces. And at that point, we called on the police to carry out an impartial investigation into what went on. So this research into November 2016 continued that work. There is no effort on our part to ignore the historical complexities of this violence, but there absolutely should be accountability on all sides.
Let me bring in the spokesperson of the Uganda Police Force. According to their report, about 187 people died. I'll tell you, Afande, we had people on ground, our reporters, and after you did give us a number as police and the army, as they kept moving around, days later, people were saying, look, our people are missing. We don't know where they are. We don't know, what has happened to them. And to date, it is the story. And so we keep wondering, what the number that police is giving us, there is a lot more than meets the eye.
Well, Mr. Singh, I don't know who is giving you those figures. 187?
The people on ground.
187?
Well, that's according to them, but I was telling you that our reporters on ground, as they spoke to people, they told them there were many more missing people.
We have made it very, very clear to the public. The numbers are known.
What are the numbers according to police? Let's clarify that.
We can't account for any missing person in any part of the country. Sometimes people go out of their areas of residence looking for opportunities. Not necessarily they have been killed or they are missing and they can never be traced. And
it happened around the time of the violence, really?
No, I'm just talking in general terms.
But give us the number, according to police, how many people died?
Yeah, I'm coming to that. And we were never inconsistent. We were keeping you updated and the public on the numbers depending on the bodies that we would recover. We first gave a figure of 87, and this number rose to 103 when we finally combed up the whole area. Some bodies were recovered in the hills after some time, and they were even decomposing. And the numbers that we confirmed were 103. And that includes the 16 bodies of the police officers that were butchered in this heinous incident.
So 87 civilians, 16 police officers.
Exactly.
To make it 103.
And 3.
Maria, according to your report, you say that there should be some kind of international investigation. What modus operandi should that take? Who should these people be? How can we have, especially the aspect of neutrality therein, for that to happen?
Yeah, I have to say I'm shocked that the Ugandan police and military are not willing to face more scrutiny for their conduct. I think that that's a standard part of being a professional force, that they would welcome clarity as to what went on and why things occurred so that they can apply lessons learned going forward, and they can ensure that anyone who did violate international standards is held to account among their forces. So I see this as an absolute requirement of all basic and standard security force operations. I want to be clear, there have not been investigations into the security force conduct in Kasese. It's part of our concern here, and it's why we are arguing for the international component, because we've been calling for investigations into the conduct of both sides of this conflict for several years now, and it simply doesn't materialize. What we see is large numbers of arrests, both in July 2014 and in the aftermath of the post-electoral violence last year. We've seen ad hoc and irregular amnesties. We've seen some people charged before military courts and some people charged before civilian courts. What we haven't seen is careful and precise law enforcement operations with careful evidence collected. And what we certainly haven't seen is the same kind of scrutiny that's been applied to the civilians applied to the security forces. As far as the investigation that we're calling for, it could take different forms, but I think what's most important is that it's credible. You know, as we've seen since November 2016, the government spokespeople have been adamant that they have all the information about what went on. But very few of the people speaking in Kampala have walked the hills of Rwenzori on a regular basis, and they certainly haven't said to community members, please come forward and let us know if people are still missing in your communities. We want an accurate inventory of the death toll and who's missing. And until that happens, there'll be long-standing concerns for what happened in November. For example, the Ugandan government could extend an invitation to the United Nations Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial executions to take an investigation. It could call on African Commission mechanisms to come to Uganda. It could simply decide to do a joint investigation and call on some international experts to provide forensics and other expertise that would be needed to make a sound conclusion at the end of these investigations.
Afande Kaweesi, would you as the police force be welcome to an international investigation? I would like to think it's actually helpful to you too, because Ugandans and clearly the international community, at least a part of it, don't believe your reports. And so if there was an independent inquiry into this, it would exonerate you too at the end of the day, would it not? Assuming what you're telling us is the truth.
We don't need an exoneration because we have not committed, crimes.
Shouldn't that be determined by an independent inquiry?
Just a moment. And in any case, we cannot stop Burnett and her colleagues in the same thinking to come up with such ideas they are trying to advance. But Uganda is a functioning state which has a strong foundation of rule of law. It has a strong judicial system. It's not a failed state. And there is no need of calling for any independent international investigations because the state is not failing.
How is it not failing? You just told us that sometimes people go missing because they go abroad to work and that kind of thing. And clearly police has not picked interest in finding out, okay, if there are missing people, is it true, like you're saying, they went abroad to Dubai to work like you insinuate?
No.
Or could it be that they went missing otherwise? You have not clearly found that out.
You said missing Ugandans.
In Kasese, I'm not talking about those in Masaka.
Let anybody who has a relative or any person he thinks has gone missing come up.
Why does the police take initiative to do that?
But why? Why should we say...
You're the investigative arm of government,
no. We cannot just speculate. People must come out and say, we were 5 members in the family, 3 are missing.
So are you saying, Andrew, that all the investigations that police does are because somebody has complained? Never do you wake up and realize there's a challenge here, let's find out as police. You don't do that at all?
Which challenge? You must have a complaint.
If
complaint
you never
must be
investigate
raised.
without a complaint?
Well, then you'll be speculative.
That's not true, Andrew. You know for a fact that many times as police you have investigated without somebody first,
No, you must have,
raising a complaint.
you must have a lead in this. You must suspect something is happening, then you investigate. Someone has to come up with a complaint. And that's the basic fundamentals of investigations.
So what's so bad about a third party coming in to try and ascertain
Why
what
a third
happened?
party?
What's so wrong about it? Our laws provide for it, and it's not a bad thing, one would think.
No, you see, let's look at countries that have had those international interventions. These are countries that have had a complete breakdown of the state functioning. Are we even close to that? With
all due respect, that's just not true, Afande. Uganda has a case pending before the International Criminal Court right now. One of your own citizens is already on trial in an international mechanism. This is not about whether Uganda is a failed state. It's about whether or not there's a political commitment to holding its security forces accountable. And I don't think it's fair to expect someone who lost a young child from Wesumbu or Kidodo in Kasese to come to Kampala to report to you, or to trust local authorities who they believe may be responsible for the death of their loved ones. Why aren't you calling for people to bring forward information, traveling to the region, and ensuring that witnesses aren't facing reprisals in Kasese? We've seen the footage of what happened there. It's a terrifying ordeal. And the fact that police were killed is horrific. There should be justice. Those people who are in prison now have been charged for the killings of police. That can all proceed, but that doesn't absolve all the security forces who were deployed in November of facing accountability for what they did.
Afande, what I hear her say is that what happened in Kasese late November happened. Police did what it did, moved in to arrest the situation, as you folks say. People died, and we have moved on. And you see, as we move on, there are people that are still hurting. Some of their loved ones died. Others, their loved ones are in jail. The case is yet to be disposed of. Others just have no idea where their loved ones are, and they disappeared at about that time. And as police, you're saying we have moved on until you come to us and complain. And we're saying no, the police should take initiative. We expect that if there is issue to do with some Ugandans missing and so on, you should get concerned as Uganda Police Force for your citizens that you are meant to secure.
We are getting
to do some finding out, but that's not what's happening.
This is her own story.
So why don't you go and find out the real story?
No. The real story, we can't get it from her.
But you're not going on ground. That's what we are saying.
Just a moment. We are on ground. Do you know how many people have returned since that incident happened? Those actually who are even members of the Royal Guards. Hundreds. They have returned.
What do you mean by returning to
where? They were in hiding because of this clash. They went hiding, and later on they returned. And that means they trust that if they are to return, there will be no cases laid against them.
And you're saying there are hundreds of those?
Quite a number of them, because the office of the resident district commissioner was mandated to handle such cases, and we've been receiving reports that many of them, and actually more than 100, have returned, and they claim they were members of the Royal Guards. What does that signify? But just going back to her report, first of all, her report has a lot of inconsistencies. First, it starts it looks at what happened on 26 and 27. There is a long litany of events since 2013 up to 2016. She does not mention of any of those. And this is not an issue that started in 2016. It has a long history. And there have been constructive engagements between the government and the authorities in Kasese. And the Royal Guards have been attacking innocent and uniformed people in many occasions. And there were very few incidences where the security would react and kill. That means they restrained a lot of force. How come on the 26th and 27th, the security had to take an extra measure and shot at some people, killing them? That explained that we had reached a point that this time around you had to use all legal forces, the legal force that you can use to protect yourself. And she cannot call for an independent investigation on the actions of the security forces, because whatever the security forces did was in their mandate and the law allows it.
You seem to be saying that security forces are above the law, that whatever they do cannot be questioned. And we are saying there's a problem with that.
No.
And by the way, some of us are not even saying you are wrong and Human Rights Watch is correct. We just want to understand what exactly happened. And as police, you should be vulnerable to say, okay, if you want to investigate us, what's wrong with that?
First of all, she's calling for independent investigation. Does it mean hers was not independent?
Well, because clearly nobody will trust her
No.
her, Human Rights Watch alone.
That it means it was dependent. That's why she never even took time to ask any of the security agencies during her investigations. She never.
Can I reply to any of this?
Yes, you should, and do so this way, Maria. Many times when you release the report, especially the security forces will say you never talk to them, you never give them a chance to have their say, but you speak to the locals and whoever it is that you do, depending on what the situation is, and then you put together a report, and they've not had the right of reply. Did they have one this time round?
Well, first of all, Brigadier Karamira has already confirmed that he and I spoke and that I laid out our findings for him, so I don't know why we're even talking about
those are the findings. How about the process before the findings?
Right of reply. Brigadier, now General Elwelu, was very assertive in taking to the media. He's given countless media interviews on television, printed at length in the New Vision. His side of the story has been the only side of the story since the events of November 2016. So I have to say, I just don't think that that's what's at issue here. And as I said, Afande, with all due respect, you're just simply wrong about the historical context here. There's a clear link to a 12-page letter to General Kayihura laying out every single incident in which we had concerns, and several of them are the same incidents that you put out in the Ugandan Media Center statement. So this is not about absolving the past. It's about looking at the situation on November 2016. And the fact that you think someone may have done something wrong 6 months before or a year before is not what's applicable under international law, UN standards on the use of force. The question is what happened that day at the palace. And until you actually carry out an investigation which interviews the soldiers and police who were present inside and outside the compound, eyewitnesses who were surrounding the compound who may have been inside, you won't know the answers to those questions. You can't say that because incidents have occurred in the past, those people deserve to die. That's simply unlawful and illegitimate.
Maria, according to your report, you say that these fellows that had machetes, sticks, and so on, that were wielding all that, were not, as the police and the army say, an outfit, a rebel outfit, an armed group. What are they, according to you? What would you term them as?
Civilians. If they carry weapons and use them unlawfully, then they can be tried for crimes, there's no doubt. But under international law, they would not constitute an armed group. No one is arguing, at least I certainly hope that no one in the Ugandan security forces, particularly on the legal side, would argue that international humanitarian law, that is the laws of war, apply in Kasese. This is not an international armed conflict. So people who commit crimes can absolutely be charged for those crimes and prosecuted before courts of law, whether they were carrying a machete or a knife or a gun or a pencil. The point is that it's not about what they're carrying, about what they do. Ugandans know that machetes are used for a lot of different reasons, just as knives are. They can be used for legitimate purposes, and they can be used for absolutely unlawful and horrific purposes. But until there's an investigation, I don't think it's clear that the people who were killed in the palace that day were presenting lethal force to those security officers. That's the question here. And as we see from some of the footage of the raid on the palace, clearly security forces are beating people with their arms tied behind their backs. So even if they may have had a legitimate use of lethal force at certain points throughout the assault, there's certainly no reason to be beating suspects who are physically restrained and face down on the ground.
Maria, your report seems to point all the guns at the security forces, police and the army, but it doesn't quite bring out the element of the tribal tension within those areas, because, you know, there has been tension. That's the history of the violence in that area, tribe against tribe, etc., etc. Some will say there was also a play out of the political happenings during the election. That doesn't quite come out. The guns are pointed just to the police and to the army, and yet clearly it could, you know, at some point have been an issue of, I belong to this tribe, it belongs to the other tribe, and we are out against each other. We don't quite see that in your report, Maria.
Yeah, I don't believe that's true. There's a link to our previous reporting, particularly around the July 2014 attacks, that lays out our concerns for intercommunal violence and the way in which some of the ethnic dimensions of this conflict have played out. I don't think it's necessary to copy and paste our past research. Everyone's capable of reading online a series of documents. It happens all the time. So and we do bring out the killings of police. It was very clear. I pored over mortuary books. The police bodies were registered. They're named. Who dropped off the bodies is named. And then when it comes to everyone else, it says 20 bodies. Those bodies are not named. Who dropped them off is not listed. So we see immediately a different handling. So we don't dispute that police were killed. As we say in our research, it's absolutely tragic that those police were killed, but people have been arrested and charged for those crimes. That is the way the system is supposed to work. What we don't see is similar scrutiny on the other side. That's the issue here.
Afande Kaweesi, wish it away as you might, the dust is not about to settle regarding what happened in Kasese. And we would like to hear at least some kind of commitment from police that you'll do something as an investigative, you know, department, if you like, of government, to investigate, call it talk, call it perception, whatever you might want to call it, that there's a lot more than meets the eye, that many more people could have died than the ones that you are telling us about. You just told us that hundreds of people have returned, they were into hiding. And I'm wondering, why did the police not, you know, many times when you catch a thief and so on, you display them and call us the media and say, this one we have arrested, he's been notoriously disturbing people, and here we are, we have them. And we're thinking, why has that not happened? So that, away from just absolving yourself, but that the truth gets to come out.
There is no attempt to absolve ourselves. And we are not denying that we used lethal force.
Was it justifiable?
It was justifiable. Now, just sometime, really, the challenge I get with these international observers, they are telling you 16 policemen were hatched to death. These genocidal-minded guys, organized as they were, attacked in their formations, attacked police stations, killed the police personnel, and in the process, many of them were killed. And you don't call that justifiable?
Those are the previous ones. So right now, what happened 26th and 27th? You were trying to revenge or what?
No, that's not on 25th or where. This exactly happened on 26th. Because there is an incident that happened on 25th, and subsequent to that, there was a sporadic eruption of violence where they attacked police posts and killed a number of them. In self-defense and in order to prevent more killings, the police shot at those people in various sub-counties, as she enumerated in her report. And that is one side of it. The second side, those who did not, those who were killing, many of them retreated and went to the palace. And they were regrouping from the palace. Effort was done to let these people out, and those are the constructive negotiations that were going on between government and the Obusinga Rwenzururu, and even the commander of the military operations, until these negotiations could not bear any fruit, and then a decision had to be taken that a raid has to be done on the palace. there was no single child whatsoever. Be it in those who died, be it in those who were arrested, be it in those who were rescued, there was no single child. Where she gets her facts that they were children, that is another story. She will prove it. Because we have done all our best to prove that point, because it has been on and on and on. And there was no single child in this. By the way, even the family of the king had to leave the palace, I think, a day before, knowing that they knew that maybe it was not safe. There was the family member, apart from himself, the wife and the children were not in the palace, and yet they live in the palace.
Maria, what evidence do you adduce to make the elements in your report believable? When you talk about children, you said about 15, if I remember correctly, in your report, 15 children were not reported, and several others. Why should it be believable for you?
Right. I'm happy to answer that. I just want to clarify one point. I think genocidal intent is a clear example of the Afande's legal confusion. Some of the policemen who died, including one crime preventer who died, were Bakonzo themselves. There was, I think, absolutely no evidence to indicate that there was any genocidal intent. People may well have sought to kill people, but this violence does not fall purely on ethnic lines. So I think we need to be careful throwing around terms like genocide here. When it comes to our evidence, as I said, we worked our way through the communities that were most affected by this tragedy. We spoke to different local religious leaders. We asked if people were still looking for their loved ones. I mean, one basic point I think that the police should answer here is that, assuming it's true that police took DNA evidence from the 51 bodies who were buried near the military barracks in Kasese, how would the Afande-like families who are still looking for their loved ones to approach police and ask for that information? There is simply no mechanisms for that. There were no postmortems left behind in Kasese. All of that documentation was taken to Kampala. So how is it that someone who feels that their loved one died, let's say even an adult here, that they're looking to find out for sure that that person was buried in one of the unmarked graves in Kasese military barracks, how would they go about that? These are the kinds of questions that are still being asked. And until the military and the police take these questions of accountability and scrutiny seriously, until they travel there and create an environment in which people are willing to come forward, because let me be clear, that is not the environment in Kasese. Police and military are heavily deployed. There's been a lot of fear-mongering and a lot of concern for reprisals. People are not in a state where they feel that they can speak about these issues, but that must be encouraged if there's going to be justice for these cases. And we ultimately located 14 families, because one family lost 2 children. They were last seen in the palace. They have not been seen again. There's no reason to believe that they were able to get out alive. And there's clear evidence from the photographs that were taken after the palace raid that there was a whole life in that palace compound of women running small businesses, of people taking care of animals, of vocational skills for young women. We can't deny that the palace was more than just a residence for the king. There was a life there, and that life has been shattered. And there are real questions about what happened to the unarmed civilians who were present that day.
Maria, you seem to be saying two things. You talk about the police should go on ground, create an environment, investigate and so on, and then you talk about an international investigation. What exactly are you asking for?
I think, frankly, that the police and the military should decide to create an investigative unit. I think they should call on some international expertise. There's a variety of mechanisms, as I said. They could call on some of the UN special rapporteurs. They could call on African Union special rapporteurs. They could call on the Justice Rapid Response Unit, which is a mechanism set up to provide immediate and urgent assistance to investigations. And they should carry out those investigations jointly in a fair and impartial way. I think that absolutely, that there's no doubt governments can defeat investigations if they choose. We see witness tampering and intimidation of witnesses in many, many countries around the world. None of that would be unique to the situation in Kasese for people to be afraid to come forward. But ultimately, the government can play a really critical role in saying to people, we want to know what happened. There will not be reprisals for people who are reporting their loved ones as missing. We will not take steps to harass or threaten anyone. Please come forward. But that's not the mood here. As you can see, it's defensiveness and denials. And in that context, of course, people are going to be afraid to come forward. When you see what happened to people who had already been, taken into government custody with their hands tied behind their backs, being beaten, it's not an environment in which people are going to want to come forward and speak to the security services. Ultimately, the police and the military could do well to ask for international support. It would lend credibility to investigations.
What happens in the event? Because look, these people are angry. They're angry because of the way police came out at them. People lost their loved ones, young people, and the like. So when you say you spoke to them and they'll tell you we lost our people, what if? It could be that they're trying to incriminate police or the army because they're angry, so they're trying to get back at them. So how do you believe them?
Well, I think if someone had killed one of your children, you would be angry. That's a pretty normal response. So I'm not sure where we go with that. Most of the people we spoke to were very concerned about finding food and about paying school fees. These are not people of great means, and they have very significant concerns about how to provide for their family, particularly, for example, in the death of in the aftermath of the death of a breadwinner. So many people voiced serious concerns for that and wanted help figuring out how to go about receiving money for food and school fees. These are basic humanitarian questions. Many people wanted justice. They wanted to see accountability. I mean, I'll flag that we did a lot of research into the killings that occurred around the September 2009 violence, for example, in Kampala when the Buganda demonstrations happened. And as you know, the Natete police station was burned down. And there were a lot of people arrested and charged with terrorism for that fire. And ultimately, several years later, all those charges were dropped, and the judge said that the police had done a poor job, that they wanted convictions by all means, and that they had no evidence that the people who were arrested were involved in that case. So I just want to say that there are concerns here. There's a history of not being careful about police investigations at the time that events occur, that events get politicized very quickly and turned into public relations instead of focusing on the facts, carrying out careful investigations, and ensuring that the correct perpetrators are charged and held accountable. Correct perpetrators on both sides of this conflict.
Afande Kaweesi, how do we move on from this? There's a report by an international organization, Human Rights Watch International, and they are saying there's a lot more that police should have done, and the army, and should do. Is it going to be the police saying, look, these people, international community, Human Rights Watch, they're always, putting together reports that are not factual, they're out to get us, and so we move on swiftly. You deny the report, and it's business as usual.
No. She has come up with a report, and that's her version. We are not going to respond as per her reports because she can't determine how investigations should be done here in Uganda. As I told you, we have a functioning judicial system here, and all is being done to ensure that whoever participated in these criminal activities is brought to book. There is a whole judicial process that is going on, and you know it. For those who aided, those who participated in any kind of these clashes. Her point of view is that the security forces that participated in this operation should be investigated. And our view is that whatever security did was within their mandate to defend.
It is not subject to any question.
It is within their mandate, first of all, to save the people they are supposed to save. Number two, to save themselves.
And the police force is such a sacrosanct body that it cannot do anything wrong.
And what she's trying to insinuate in her report is that the police act was not necessary, given even the circumstances they were operating in. She does not look at how the police was killed. Did you see those mutilated bodies of the police?
I did, and we say.
Did you? And I don't think this is fair on her side. Did she know that whoever was being killed, they would take away the gun to go and kill others?
We specifically said
And the police would just look on and say, please, even those, she's saying that some were arrested and humiliated during the arrest. We just want, she wants us to have arrested them and give them a cup of tea and say, please sit here. For those who are killing people in broad daylight, no. I don't think that she's being fair.
There's
Secondly,
a big difference between not giving suspects and offering them a cup of tea, yeah?
Sorry?
There's a big difference between not beating and torturing suspects and giving them a cup of tea. Uganda has an anti-torture law. I think it would be fantastic if the police would actually apply it in some cases. We haven't yet seen the torture law applied to police conduct.
Well,
respond and wrap it up. Our time is up.
As we come to the end of the discussion, one, she mentioned about that we have not done much to call on the public to come and identify the bodies of those we buried in the public cemetery. That's not true. All bodies that were recovered, the 103 bodies, first post-mortem was done. The records at the police station in Kasese, she never bothered to ask for those records. The toxicological samples and DNA samples were taken. They are now ready. And we have been talking to leaders that whoever has a person that has gone missing since that time to come up, and then we cross-check from the DNA samples we have. None has shown up. So what should we do? And she's saying we have not done much. All this is in place. But because she did not bother to ask what actually is going on, she becomes speculative. Maria Burnett has been in Uganda and she knows the systems in Uganda, how they operate. I was even wondering how she had even to release this report online.
What's wrong with that?
No.
This is 2017. Things can be done online.
She could even have called all stakeholders, by the way, here in a conference like she has always done. But you know, her actions becomes suspicious in the nature that she did not involve any of us.
Well, clearly the dust is yet to settle.
But
we hope that eventually it does the right way.
In a sum up, what should be done? One, the judicial process is ongoing. It would even be subjudicial, and really for us to come and talk details about the investigation. But since it has come to our attention that there is a report revealing that, we had to come up and put some light, throw some light on some of those issues she's being raising. Let's leave the judicial process to go on. The security situation in Kasese is becoming stable day by day, and we think this whole problem will settle. All
right, Andrew Felix Kaweesi, spokesperson of the Uganda Police Force, and Maria Burnett, she's the Associate Director of Human Rights Watch, joining us via Skype from the USA. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this morning.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, TV.
All right, and that's it for the big story. We clearly hope that this dust eventually settles, that from both sides, whether all stakeholders, whether it be police, the aggrieved parties, and of course the bereaved families, and everybody will get to have these answers come through. That's it for the big story. Thank you for joining us. My name is Joel Senyonyi.